So 4 letters that are about to shake the entire defense supply chain are here. CMMC. The new compliance deadline on November 10th, 2025 isn't just paperwork, it's a survival test. All small to mid-sized businesses that pass will keep their business, revenue, and contracts that ultimately flow up to the Department of Defense, also called the Department of War now. Those that don't, well, they're out. Today, I'm joined with Sam Durso, a cybersecurity leader and CMMC expert at NetGain Technologies, who's been on the front lines helping organizations prep for this massive shift. We're diving into what's real, what's myth, and what every business leader needs to do right now before the revenue stream gets dried up. This is your countdown to the flow down fallout, why small businesses are being forced into CMMC compliance. Sam, welcome to the studio, my friend.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, let's talk CMMC. And there have been a lot of changes. We've talked about it several times. We've had several webinars in the past. First, let's start at the very beginning. Okay, what is CMMC? High level, just get that out of the way. What is CMMC and who does it apply to?
Yeah, so CMMC high level is the cybersecurity maturity model for the DoD, or now the DOW, of course. It's just a compliance framework that companies need to follow whenever they're handling anything such as CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information, or FCI, Federal Contract Information.
And so when we think of Department of Defense, we think of like building tanks, building rockets and stuff like that. But I think the important thing here is, and in your experience, it goes way beyond that, doesn't it? It is way down in the supply chain. When you think of like Raytheon or Boeing or some of the big Department of Defense manufacturers, this really affects small businesses, doesn't it?
Yeah, it will affect any company that's in possession of any of this kind of information. They don't have to be, building weapons, tanks, missiles, or anything like that to be compliant under this framework.
So that's interesting. So walk us through, you mentioned FCI, Federal Contract Information, and you mentioned CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. Let's unravel both of those, okay? So FCI, what is that? Like, what are samples of Federal Contract Information?
So FCI is basically any information that's generated under a DoD contract and it's not intended for public release, but it's not classified. And this is stuff like purchase orders, delivery schedules, internal communications from the DoD, or even invoice details.
Okay, so it's not rocket design and things like that, right? It's far from it. It's really just contractor information, right? And so if small, mid-sized businesses, and I mean, I've seen CMMC compliant organizations be 6-person firms, it gets really low, right?
Right.
If they're engaged with any of the federal contract information, then CMMC applies, and then you have to go through the rubric of, are you a level 1? Are you a level 2? Really, right? Like, and if it's just federal contract information and that's it, that's all the data that you are experienced in that supply chain, then you're just a level 1, right?
Yes, that's correct. Any FCI is going to be purely level 1, which is under FAR Clause 52-204.
Right. Cool. Okay. So the other one, the level 2, is going to be CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. So walk us through what that is. Like, what are some samples of that?
Yeah, so CUI is any information that requires safeguarding, but it's not classified as well, but normally will fall under like laws, regulations, or policies. And this is stuff like technical drawings, IT system diagrams, export control data, engineering reports, security plans. And the best way I always like to compare these two is, say you go to the government and you buy a rocket design. You buy a design on how to build a ballistic rocket. The receipt you get from them will be FCI, but the drawings you get will be the CUI.
Oh, that's a really good example. So the receipt that you get is FCI. That's federal contract information pertaining to the contract itself. The actual drawings are going to be what the CUI is.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So as a business leader, if you're listening to this, right? And you are engaged in now, if you're a contractor and you get business from somebody who does business with somebody who does business with one of the prime big guys in the Department of Defense supply chain, then this is going to apply to you, right? And so you have to figure out what type of data are we engaging to win these bids, right?
Right.
I mean, that's how
Yeah.
it works. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
that's correct.
So I'm sorry, I think out loud. So that's what I'm doing. I'm verbalizing it as I follow the bouncing ball in my mind.
I'm the same way. I get called
Yeah,
insane in public sometimes.
yes, exactly, all the time. So now when that happens, then they have to decide whether they're going to be level 1 or level 2, because when they're bidding on deals, and that's what this new rule that finally came into effect, that it goes into effect November 10th, which is just around the corner. When that rule comes into play, then you are not going to be able to bid on that business, correct? Unless you are, if I only have FCI, I have to be level 1. So I have to go through the level 1 process and then show them that I'm certified, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then likewise, if I'm supposed to be level 2 and I actually touch CUI, then I have to show them that I'm level 2 in order to be able to bid on these contracts now.
Correct, but a little bit different actually. For level 2, they have the 180-day POAM rule, which is the plan of action milestone in this new CFR rule that came out, where if the contractor is not fully compliant, they still might be eligible with a conditional CMMC status to get that contract, but they have to show that they're going to fix those gaps within the 180 days, or those contracts are going to get pulled away.
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense, right? So they do have, well, here's the practical effect of that is, even there's this plan of action, this POAM 180-day time period. They have to get started soon though, right? I mean, isn't this something that organizations that are going to be at the level 2 stage handling controlled unclassified information, CUI, they need to get going because it takes some time to get fully compliant, doesn't it?
Yeah, it will take quite some time. I've seen companies do it in a month all the way to, years to do it. And it really depends on the resources available, the team available, if you're willing to put all of your effort into it. But I know companies can't put all their effort into a single thing at a time.
Right. Well, I mean, and in fairness, the ones that we've seen do it that fast are pretty small, right? Like they only have 1 or 2 computers that are handling the CUI, so they're able to kind of segment that off.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the one client that I did do it when I was freelancing was just a few employees. They had 3, 4 computers, and that's about it. So it
That
was
makes
very
sense.
easy to understand, their entire network map and what goes where and how to secure those, specific devices down that did touch the CUI.
Yeah, it makes sense. High level, why are they doing this CMMC? Like, why are they starting this requirement? Because small businesses have got to think this is a big burden. This is going to be a big change, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gonna be huge, and I mean the biggest reason is because the government always has projects for people to do. That's why construction companies, for example, even though it's the government's property that's being built on, construction companies are doing that construction for them because it's just easier instead of making a government-owned construction company, for example.
Right. Yeah, and it protects the data of engagements with the Department of Defense, which is obviously highly sensitive. Now, granted, they're not talking about nuclear codes and designs of nuclear weapons or anything like that at this level, especially at the level 1 level, or even part of the level 2, but it is part of that whole supply chain. And as we've seen from security incidents and breaches, like once they get part of that supply chain, they could always move to other parts. And that's where it gets scary.
Yeah, that's why supply chains are always needing to be locked down. I mean, there was an incident years ago where a company had their entire pay systems coming from the supplier, and that
Yeah.
supplier started having an employee that was infecting those devices as they're going out with malware. So every time someone swiped a card, that
Right.
malware was activating, taking those card numbers.
Yeah. And I mean, and we just recently saw it with the Clorox breach. We saw it with the recent Discord breach. It's not they're not CMMC, but you see how the supply chain gets affected, right? They didn't breach Discord, they breached a third party IT provider, right? A Zendesk or whatever. And then from there they got to Discord. So it's always that supply chain. It's that who are you doing business with and how are they protecting their data because they have access to enter inside your network. Makes sense, right?
Right.
So walk us through. So CMMC became law when? Was it last December 2024? I mean, it's been around for a while, but I mean, it really got its teeth last December, didn't it?
Yeah, that's when it really started to hit companies the hardest. But before then, a lot of people looked at it more of as a recommendation.
Right. Like one of some of the other frameworks, ISO, NIST, stuff like that, right? They're guides of what you should do.
Right.
Okay. And then CMMC came in and then they were waiting for what do they call it? The final rule that came out recently that set the date of November 10th.
Yeah, the final rule that came out about a month ago. That's what everyone's been waiting for. And there was thought that it would come out, this month, but it coming out a month earlier kind of caught everyone off guard too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's better late than never. And it is, I mean, it's just something, it's a sign of the times. It's just things that are going to have to happen for everybody. Let me ask you the difference between the levels. So when an organization, because I've spoken to business owners and they don't really understand the different levels or they don't think that they're that big of a deal. But level one has what? 15, 17 controls, right?
Right.
And you don't have to have an independent, it definitely helps having an independent organization help you get there and make sure that it's correct and make sure that you're filling out this self attestation. But you're allowed to self attest, right? That means you literally sign a form that says, I have complied with these 15, 17 controls, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's all you
So
got to submit.
then that's all you have to submit. And what are these types of controls? I mean, we have the list down, but generally, what are they trying to make sure is protected?
They're really looking to make sure that the FCI is protected. I mean, if you look at a lot of the controls under level one, a lot of them are going to be really focused on that FCI. Like, are the devices that have limited user access processes running in the background? Then, when you look at the physical part of those assessment, you really just see the controls asking: is the spot where FCI is stored protected with cameras, motion sensors? Are they locked?
Makes sense because you don't want it like at a kiosk or a public terminal or something open to the entire office, right?
Correct.
Okay, and so it's also something that, as I understand, can be like it doesn't have to like the entire organization doesn't have to be engaged with FCI, right? Only if only a part of it is engaged with the federal contract information, then you just have to show the computers accessing it can be done. It can be segmented from like different departments in the organization, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's actually a whole control on itself is are the people who are authorized to be accessing this information the ones accessing it. Because
Okay.
we don't need HR, for example, accessing FCI because they're more in charge of
Right.
the internal employees.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Or sales. Well, no, sales might be, right?
It depends on what
Sales
you're
could be
doing with them, of
right.
course.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing the bids and stuff, you might actually have some access, but you would use those machines, etc.
Yeah.
So when an organization self-attests, does it themselves, what all do they have to do and what do they have to be careful of?
So all they have to do is go register, get a cage code, which is basically like their serial numbers, the best way I like to explain it, that identifies them as the company to the government. And once they have all that, they go to the website where you can submit your scores. And you just get those put in place. You select the right options on what your company falls under. who's doing the attestation and, attaching any files you think you need to be attached. And that's really all you do there.
Okay. And then how do you know if you pass, or is it automatic?
It's automatic. From what I've seen, I have not noticed any changes recently. Of course, with this new rule
Right.
just coming out, you're not really going to see those changes until people start, submitting that stuff. But
Trying.
from
Yeah.
what I've seen, just submit it and then you're done.
Okay. That's phenomenal. And then what are the risks of doing it? Like, I can imagine if you're a small business, you want to be able to bid on, you're a 30-person, 50-person company. You want to be able to bid with this one company who might have 1,000 employees, but they're not necessarily a prime with the Department of Defense. They're in the supply chain, but you want to be able to bid on that, and the FCI flows down to you. What if you fudge some of it? What if you don't have multi-factor authentication, or you don't have this, or you don't have a good firewall or something like that, but you just fudge it? Is there a risk to that small business?
So that's the hard part, especially if level one, because from my knowledge, when you submit it, it's all done, it's automatic. From my knowledge on that one is no one really looks at it, no one reviews it and confirms that you're telling the truth. Because, if they had to do that, they would have no time to worry about like level twos or especially level threes.
Right.
And so the risk that you have there is if something happens and there's a data breach, there will be an investigation. And during that investigation, they're going to pull that record and look, and they'll say, okay, well, you claim this, but the reason that this breach happened was because this control actually wasn't in place. And that's when it'll actually all start to hit. It would just take one breach because you're required to disclose if that FCI or CUI even was ever leaked.
Right. And then you run the risk of, there's like federal rules against that, right? I mean,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what exactly it's called. I believe it's the false flag rule,
yes, false
where
claims.
false
Yeah, yeah,
claims,
yeah.
or if you, falsify stuff, you could be looking at what we've seen mostly is fines, but probably depending on how severe it is, they could find reason to penalize even further than just a fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then what about the float out? Like, isn't like, don't, like, when you're bidding, if you're a small business and you're bidding to a larger sub of one of the primes, there's still a chance that they're going to make sure that you actually have those things, because they themselves don't want to get in trouble. Right. So, like, from what I've been reading, I heard, starting November 10th or even before, you're going to start seeing this in the bids. Like, provide your certification, your cage number, etc., that you are actually level 1, right?
Correct.
And so they may want, if there's any question or any flag raised in their discussions with you or whatever, they very well may start asking you questions about that, right?
Right. And that's the thing. Is primes, must ensure that their subs are meeting the same level that's appropriate based on the information they're going to receive. So they make sure that FCI or COI is not shared with the subs unless they're compliant under that.
Okay, so that's a big thing. So you actually, it's dangerous to fudge that self attestation, and you really have to make sure you're doing it, because not only could you wait for a breach and then something bad happens, but the actual bid itself could be blown up, right? Like, you are bidding on something, and even if a breach doesn't happen and you get investigated, etc., obviously that's going to be bad. But you really do run the risk of your main pipeline of business there being cut off if they get wind of the fact that you're fudging it.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. So the bulk of it now, in terms of numbers of all the contractors in the supply chain, it seems like about 35% or so are level 1, but the bulk of everybody is really level 2, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're the ones dealing with controlled unclassified information, CUI. So from the 15, 17 controls, depending on how you read those controls in level 1 to level 2, it doesn't go from like 15 to 17 to like 25. It shoots all the way up to like 120. doesn't it?
Yeah, it's 110 practices are then, moved into level 2, which is very heavily focused on the framework of NIST 100-171.
Okay. So very detailed, and you have to shore up, create all the documentation for it, make sure it's tested, make sure that all the controls are in place and things like that, right?
Correct. And you got to do something called a system security plan as well, or an SSP. And this is basically a living document of how you're meeting every individual control. And these documents can get very long. I mean, I've seen them as big as 100 pages, and they're always asking for network diagrams. Do you meet this control? Yes. How do you meet this control? And you got to explain it a bit. And they're living documents. You got to update them every time there's a change in your organization. But this is going to be the first document any auditor or even the DoD is going to want to see right off the bat of, are you compliant? Because that's going to be their roadmap to determining everything.
Okay, so that makes sense. So, in the difference between level 2 and level 1 is that level 2 you can't self-attest,
Correct.
right? Okay. So, level 2 you actually have a C3PAO. It sounds like C3PO from Star Wars, but it's not. It's actually C3PAO. It's a certified third-party assessor organization, right? So
Right.
that's the certified organizations, and they will come in and actually do the assessment of you, correct?
Correct. And just actually a small correction is level 2 you can self-attest, but it's always something I try to avoid telling people, because the only times I've seen clients ever self-attest, like the companies that I freelanced for, only one of them ever self-attested, and that's because they were actually getting FCI. They weren't really getting
Right. They weren't
CUI
really getting
data,
CUI.
but
Right.
they wanted to get it just in case, but they couldn't afford an auditor, so they didn't have a choice. But also, that's where the warning comes in of, even if you self-attest and you say you're CMMC level 2, if you start getting any real sensitive CUI information, you got to
They're
get
going to
that
make,
auditor.
right, exactly. And as I understand, there was just a recent report that came out that showed that it was like less than 5% of everybody dealing in level 2 can actually self-attest. So when you get to level 1, it seems safe to say that you're going to need to be assessed by a third party, by one of those certified third parties. Does that seem right based on your experience?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
from what I've seen.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to. You see these things, but you don't know if it's actually happening in real life, and you actually see it. So that's why I was asking. So, level 2 CUI, that's the actual designs. That's the actual, it's not the receipts for it or the contract information. It's the actual content itself, right?
Correct. It's
And
the technical drawings, the export control data, diagrams, plans, anything like that.
there's not that many, I imagine. There's not like tens of thousands of C3POs assessing organizations out there. So you've got to get in line and get in queue and make sure that all these things are kind of done ahead of time, or at least mostly done, don't you?
Correct. And that's the hard part. Is I remember I was in a town hall discussing CMMC, and there's definitely way less than 1,000 C3s out there, maybe
Wow.
around the 100 area. And we
Wow.
got thousands, more than 10,000s, maybe close to 100,000s of companies that need to get CMMC level 2. But if you
Right.
only have this many C3s out there, you're looking at some real mathematical issues, because from what I've seen is they can only fit, at most probably 10 clients in a year, because they got to audit, and that takes some time. And
Right.
so for them to, fit that many clients in and how many we have, you could be waiting years to finally get assessed.
Right. In the meantime, you won't be able to bid on those or be awarded those contracts.
Correct.
So this is one of those things where compliance and cybersecurity actually affects business, right? Like it is actually something that is a condition precedent to actually getting the business. So I can see why it's getting a lot of people's attention.
Yeah.
The 110 controls, what type of stuff is it assessing? in general? You said it's right along the lines of NIST 800. It is everything pertaining to that CUI has to be locked down, right? Like you
Yes.
have like timing out of the machines, access to the machines, the identity of the people using it, the physical access to the device, all of those things really have to be done and then reported on in that security plan.
Correct. It really breaks down all of those things, and the hardest part about it that I have learned when I first started getting in the CMC level 2 and assessing clients is the language is not very easy to understand. And there's these self-assessment documents you can use out there, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't make it any easier because it will have the control that you need to meet, but then it'll have 2 pages worth of content asking questions about that control alone. And you got to try to understand, what is the important end goal here for this control. And I remember the first time I was going through it and I had a mentor with me, and she highlighted probably 4 items of everything else on the entire set of 2 pages of what really meets that control. And those are the questions that you need to be asking yourself.
Wow. That's unbelievable. And then, we were talking earlier about what happens if you try and take shortcuts here. And because it deals with the Department of Defense, they're not really tolerating a lot of shortcuts, are they?
No, they are
You know,
not. And you're going to have to get it past that auditor first, too, if you're not self testing.
right. You and I had talked earlier this year, the Department of Justice brought False Claims Act enforcement against a couple contractors that had self attested that hadn't been actually compliant. And so you're going to start to see a lot of things like that where they're bringing that enforcement. Plus, you're going to see just the flow down aspect, right? The contractors that you're doing the business with, they might want to see some proof that you're actually, not just the certification that, oh yeah, it says that I'm good, but because you're self-attesting, they might want to just vet and see some of those controls in place.
Yeah, that's correct. And that's the scariest thing about auditors too, is, working with them in the past, I have seen them get hired by third-party contractors to assess these companies to see if they're following a certain compliance framework. Like one of my clients, for example, had an ISO certification, and the auditors will ask you a single question that's very broad, and they're going to hope that you say something wrong so they can start asking a lot more questions.
Just to verify that you actually meet the credentials, even though you get the certification through ISO or whatever, they still want to make sure that you're actually doing it.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? So what happens if you don't, when you get audited and you're a small mid-sized business and you get audited for level 2, C3PO comes in, what happens if you don't meet all 110 controls? I said 120 before because depending on how you read the subparagraphs, some people add new ones, but it's really 110 controls. What happens if you pass 108 of them, but not the other two?
So
Do you get like conditionally certified or no? You just get time to finish those other two.
so you don't get certified yet. You need to put it in the plan of action and milestone document.
That poem.
Yeah, that poem. And this is only allowed for levels 2 and 3, not level 1.
Got it.
And you have 180 days to fix those gaps listed in that plan of action. And if you don't close them in time, you'll lose your eligibility and, for any new or even continuing work that you're doing. But the grace period only applies if you've gone through the assessment and the issues are minor. So, like if, say, you don't allow passwords at all throughout the entire organization, anyone can log in without a password. I just need the username. That's definitely not going to be a minor issue. That's going to be a critical issue. But if I have an issue where, oh, my firewall is just not logging logins,
Right.
that's not going to be a bad issue unless the password's weak. They'll look at that and say, just turn on logging, you'll be fine. And as long as you can do that in the 180 days, they'll let you get that certification before you close it.
Okay. Makes perfect sense. So until they actually give and issue you that certification, you really can't bid on new business though. right?
Correct. It's all or nothing with the new, especially with the new law out there.
Wow. Okay, so that's got a lot of impact. So if you are engaged, I guess the message to small mid-sized businesses is if you're engaged in any part of the Department of Defense, Department of War supply chain, even if you are a commercial printer and you're part of it, or you're, somebody who you wouldn't think is like designing rockets, right? Or tanks. But if you are doing something that is part of that supply chain, you're going to at least have the FCI, that federal contract information, in your supply chain. And you could potentially, depending on what it is, you could be accessing CUI. Is there a way people can check to see what level they have to be?
So the best way that you guys can check to see what level you are is to contact your contracting office, whoever is giving you that DoD contract. They're always going to be the best person to tell you, what level you're going to need to be following, what kind of information you are going to have. Even if you have to go to the DoD directly, as if they're your contracting office, ask whoever's giving you that contract.
And they'll tell you what the information that you get from them or through them actually constitutes. Meaning, if you're on the fence or if it's gray, because different businesses, I understand, like different businesses, I've had people ask us, like, is this FCI? Is it, CUI? And I've always kind of given them the answer that you gave us today. And that is like, is it the content itself or is it the receipt for the contract
Right.
So makes sense. So what are you seeing out in the field? What any stories you can share that aren't confidential? Anything that you're seeing that could shed some light and give some insight to some organizations?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing some companies not even be aware of this new rule going out, and when they are finding out, they're not understanding it. I've had an MSP that I've done work before get notice of this, and they had no idea what it meant, and they have CMMC clients in their
Right.
environment, and they didn't really, if they didn't know about this and that rule finally got put in the official law, they were going to be in trouble and those clients are going to get in trouble too.
So that's a really good point. Like your IT organization needs to be certified themselves, depending on the type of work that they're doing. If it's a MSSP and they're guiding you through this and they're helping you achieve the certification, then they don't have to be CMMC certified. But if they're going to be doing ongoing IT support and they're going to access this data, right? Then they themselves also have to be, as do other vendors that you work with.
Yeah, any kind of transmitting, processing, access, storing, anything that touches that data in one way or another, indirectly or directly, you're going to have to get that certification that they require.
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. And then what is the future hold for this? Like there was talk a year ago or so about like, well, as CMMC or with the change in administration, maybe CMMC is going away or something like that. It doesn't seem that at all. Like it is here to stay. And it's a sign of the times, it seems.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere, especially with the U.S. wanting to get more strict on how they handle, their DoD information or DOW now. And I will say it's actually getting a lot bigger than what it has been because I hear, other countries are now starting to adopt a CMMC-like framework as well. I know Canada has something. I can't remember what it is, but they're starting to get their own.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and other countries have gone much further than the US in terms of privacy laws and things like that. When you think of GDPR or even California's CCCP or CCPI, makes sense. Does make sense. Excellent. Well, Sam, thank you. Any parting words, any thoughts that you want to give on CMMC?
I would say the best advice that can be given right now is to contact that contracting office if you don't know what you have and figure out
Yeah.
what you have and get in line with that auditor if it is level 2 because you can't you can't afford that wait. Of course, we all know the saying time is money. And in this case, as each day goes by or even in this case each minute, you're getting probably hours further away from being able to get that certification if each minute it just passes.
Yep. And the D-Day, for lack of a better phrase, is November 10th of
Yeah.
2025. So, yeah, really, really good insight. And it's something I agree, like something that we talk to organizations all the time that are just like, I didn't even know I didn't know I read something about it, but I didn't know that applied to us. But they are still part of the supply chain. And I think it's that myth of, well, we're not selling anything pertaining to rockets or tanks. So I didn't think that because it didn't have anything to do with military equipment, that it wouldn't be part of it. But it still is, right? If you're a commercial printer or a food supplier or something like that, that is doing things that are in that are still feeding up to the Department of Defense primes, then this is going to apply. So it's got a pretty broad footprint, it seems.
It does, and it's only going to probably get bigger and bigger, especially as technology advances.
Yeah. Well, Sam Durso, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we will keep everybody updated on new developments on CMMC as the time progresses. And once November 10th happens and things start really falling, because you're going to hear a lot of organizations that weren't prepared that really get hit, and then you're going to start to see the pain happen. So we want to help. We hope that this gets everybody some awareness and some insight to actually ignite the fire so that they can take steps right away. Excellent. Thank you for your time, Sam. Appreciate all your insight as always, sir.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, buddy.